Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage in the slightly overcast 50-degree state of Maine. A classic fall day. There's been prettier days, but I think today is going to be okay. I was accosted by a flock of turkeys, a gaggle, a group. I'm sure there's a technical term there. On the way down to the garage. But we made peace. I made my way inside my messy shop. And I was getting sprinkled on a little bit. The weather app says there's no chance of rain, so it must have been my imagination. It is pretty amazing how they can forecast the weather almost to the minute these days. It's all I ever wanted when I used to watch the evening news or even the morning news. I just wanted to know when it was going to rain, whether I should take my bike or not, how wet I wanted to get. You know, if it's going to rain in the afternoon, tell me what time. No, we got phones that do that. So today, and in the past, I've talked about case prep on Turbo 400s, and I usually am showing what's leading up to painting it, but I don't typically show what happens after that. So let's do that today. I get lots of questions on it, and I got my own little methods. Certainly nothing fancy, just a bunch of dummy plugs and an old pan that I reuse over and over again. The paint is getting pretty thick on them. It'd be fun to strip it off to see all the different colors I've painted them. When I started this mess, I should have just chosen a color and gone with it, but I'm staring at it, looking at a purple transmission. I did one of those too. So let's take a look at it, step by step. When we go from painted to actually being ready to put stuff inside it. So I got milestones in my brain that I'm all the things that have to happen before I start dumping parts in there. So, and sometimes I mix it up, but there is no exact way to do it. The only way you realize there is an exact method or order is when you realize you can no longer install something because something else is in the way. All right, so this flat black jewel I did yesterday afternoon. I had bought it from a guy in Wisconsin, and he'd cut the bell housing roughly off, so I had to trim a little more. I'm going to put a BTE SFI rated bell housing on it. I like the BTE because it has the adapter, so if I ever upgrade, or this guy ever upgrades to a reed case, all you do is remove the adapter and the bell housing still fits. I'll show it to you again before the video's over. So I've showed you before. I'll show you again. There's these 3 tabs that stick out on the Turbo 400 front pump. You need to cut this outer ring even with that. So you have to grind these down and make everything flat all the way around. You have to taper this to the pan rail. This area gets really tight. I actually grind the pan rail so they just start hitting the bosses for these 2 bolts. I kind of taper them a little bit because the bell housing's tapered. And I like to get them first try because it's all painted and clean. I don't really want to have to start grinding on it again. And yesterday I was pretty confident, so I didn't go ahead and mock up a pump and a bell housing. I hope for the best. So let's remove my plugs. This is just a shallow pan. A couple bolts. I typically do this the other direction, but that's okay. So I use a pan to hold all my plugs and the bolts. So the pump opening, nothing but a piece of cardboard that I've cut and reused many times. I'll actually take some brake clean and just clean any paint out of the taper. It doesn't hit the sealing surface. This is actually tapered to help you install the O-ring on the front pump, but I just clean a little paint out of there. When I'm done, the linkage hole, I've never been totally happy with my plug because I don't get the hole painted, but that's okay. Kick down, that actually works pretty good. Even though, again, there could be more paint in there. I always take out the pressure port plug, clean it, and put Teflon on it so it's ready to use if somebody had to do some diagnostic work. it's not welded into the case and the case isn't going to break or whatever could possibly happen. My speedometer plug, the poor thing's been around. You can't read what it says for the numbers because they're numbered like 38 to 41 or 2, whatever. Each type of housing does 4 different driven gears. You can't see it, but I'm going to take it out. My governor cover plug. This is a Corvette lift adapter. This goes into the frame on the Corvette and you turn it, C5 Corvette, and then you lift here. Now I have 3 more of these, but this one, the paint will chip off. I've chipped it off a few times, but one day I was goofing around looking for a plug real quick, and it fit in, has a nice little handle, and I don't have the Corvette anymore, so I use it for that. I always know where that one is anyway. The tail housing is getting, my plug is getting kind of wore out, but I keep using different sets of holes. And because it's kind of torn, I'll have to do a little cleanup there as well. I got a little bleed in, but that's okay. In the background here, this is what I cover both the tail housing and the pump when I paint them. I just set that on there. And you can see she's getting pretty well built up too. Dipstick is nothing but a top hat with a plug stuck in it. You know, the top hat seal you'd normally use anyway. Modulator hole, I use a plug backwards. This actually works pretty good, protects the O-ring area. The cool line fittings, I always take them out. And if nothing else, clean them up and put them back in so they look nice, but just a couple of simple plugs. And I've drilled and tapped the pump, 1/8 inch pipe, so I had a plug on that. And now, she's naked. I went ahead and set on an old pump on my studs and tried the bell housing on, and I'm happy to say it clears literally by a piece of paper. Now, I don't have the pump gasket on it, and I also run the ATI bell housing gasket, regardless of brand of bell housing. I've covered that if you go back in my playlist. When I compared the JW, the BTE, and the ATI, I was happy to find out when I bought the ATI, it came with a cool gasket. It's a lot easier than the O-rings. So far, I've been successful with it. And I like it because I do not enjoy the experience with the O-rings. But go back and watch that video if you want to. So, I go around with the flashlight to make sure I have the clearance, and because I've gone directly out from the pump opening, I haven't touched the pump opening itself. Just knocked those 3 tabs down and went perfectly horizontal out. And I'm sure to give these a generous taper. It's really close on the passenger side, but it clears. So what I like about the BTE housing is it's priced very fair. Again, I'm not a spokesperson, but I ordered these Wednesday, and they're at my house on Friday. I ordered 3 bell housings and 2 pans, three bell housings and 3 pans, and they were here in 2 days. So I ordered it late in the day on Wednesday. This is the adapter I was talking about. Goes from your TH400 pump to your Reed case or aftermarket case style bell housing pattern. So you could just take these countersunk bolts out, lose the adapter, and now that'll go right on your Reed housing. So it would save you money down the road. Right now it's an extremely stout piece. I had a pump all cleaned up for this purpose, and I would use it as my dummy. And then one day I had to press it into service because I needed a pump. And now I had to half clean up this old one, but I cleaned the surfaces where it's important, and it's not dripping any goo in my new clean transmission. So, and then it's a simple matter of sticking it on there. Now, if you have to grind, don't look the other way. I'd rather have to grind and re-clean this case than to wonder if it's going to leak, because once you've put this whole thing together, it's going to be a pain to take it back apart. So even with the gasket and stuff, it still has to, I still put sealant under the bolts. I haven't found a better method. I had some O-ring washers that I'm not real happy with, so I'm back to using the supplied bolts instead of flange bolts because I have them. And I just put a little dab of clear silicone, and then I spend 20 minutes making sure you can't see it, because that's the way I am. Oh, and while you're grinding, this is a 40 grit flap disc. Awesome for material removal, and this thing has a lot of life left in it. But this, compared to a new one, and this one I did this whole job with, this, putting on a new one to start the job probably saves 10 minutes easy, because this thing eats some material until it gets filled up, and then you kind of gotta get another one. Despite the fact I have a mill, again, this is all in the video, I have not found a faster method. I take it outside on my roll around engine stand that I have one of these adapted to. I've showed you that as well. And lock it down. I draw a straight line across here. I cut through this half of the pan rail, because typically there's a little dent right here, so you can do half at a time. I aim this saw, my cordless sawzall, as close to these tabs, so I'm 3/16 up from this opening. I don't want to hurt this opening. We don't alter this piece right here, just these. So I come down close to that, go around halfway, cut through this, go around halfway, it drops off. I got one outside I can show you. And then I grind from there. I'm outside, so the mess isn't in the shop. I've done them inside in the wintertime. I'd like to avoid that. I think I'll go outside even in the wintertime. And this is where it gets really tight right there. Extremely tight. This one's a little more forgiving, but you want to taper down off the pan rail. You still want to support the corner of the pan rail. You don't want to take this all away. So it's a walk of the tightrope of taking just enough, and it should fit no problem. The pump without an O-ring into the pump opening is still very tight. If you cock it in the least amount, you'll fight with it. And sometimes when you get all, you're bowling and thrashing, you don't realize you're doing it. If you just calm down and be gentle, you can pull it right in and out. Same as putting it back. If you were straight, you cock it in the least, it will not go. It's going to be straight, and it'll pop into the opening. Here's exactly what I'm talking about. Again, I cut through the rail, aim toward the pump, and meet in the middle. Now this one I should send to my good buddy Tom Vigu from 3V Performance. He's down in North Carolina now, does all kinds of really cool race engines, but he built the transmission that I put this bell housing on, not this one that's sitting over there. He built it 4 or 5 years ago for the guy and another mutual friend of ours. And, a C10 truck's pretty heavy. It's got like a 540 in it. And it's lasted 4 years. I took it all apart. It still looks good. I just cleaned it out. Put a bell housing on it. It broke the low roller, but through no fault of anybody's. But yeah, that's what the bell housing looks like when you cut it off. So the other few pieces that I consider case prep that have to take place before I'm ready to install any parts is the linkage seal and the corresponding linkage. I have a special driver for the seal, but for many, many decades, I use my 1/2-inch snap-on socket, the same one I use for most of the transmission anyway. And I hit it with my rubber hammer, so I really haven't ever hurt it any. And if you line it up straight, 1 or 2 whacks, and the seal's all the way in. You don't want to go crazy, you don't want to dent it. It's a metal-clad seal, but, no match for a big hammer. The same advice I just offered when you're lowering the pump in definitely goes for the rear band. if you install this as two metal lug, pins in the case, if you put this down gently and then rotate it, it will stay where it belongs and you won't have any trouble. But if you try to fight this in there and pry on it and everything else, you'll never get it in there. On the reed cases, these are more difficult, but on a stock case where there's this big opening over here, on the reed case, the lugs are 360. So this is somewhat of a challenge. You kind of got to walk it down in there with a screwdriver. But in this case, in a Turbo 400 with the giant void, maybe that's why they left that big void there, just so you could get the band in and out. Again, I put it down gently, because it's three-piece. It wants to flex and everything. But I can do it with my hand. I put it just below the lugs, and I rotate it as far as I can by hand, and then I just take my screwdriver up through the apply hole, and it pops it right in. And when you push on that, you can adjust the height because it wants to sag. So I put it perfectly level and let go of the apply position with my screwdriver, and it sits right there, and I can lower my lower unit in. Lower my lower unit. It sounds funny. And it doesn't touch. So getting it out, when I strip a transmission, I reach in and I grab opposite the lugs and I just pull up on it and it pops right out. So no prying there either. Doesn't hurt a thing. It pivots right out, but you can't go that way. I guess you could. I never tried, but I won't because it goes in easy. If you go in and rotate it, gentle, no tools other than the screwdriver that I push through the apply hole. And then the fretting ring, you have to put the fretting ring in next. And then you're ready to put stuff in, with the exception of whatever you're going to use for the thrust washer and or bearing in the bottom of the case. But when I'm past the linkage seal, the linkage, the rear band, the fretting ring, and whatever thrust devices I have at the bottom, I'm ready to start checking parts in it. I'm definitely not going to win any fashion shows with these wrinkled eBay shirts, especially when I'm filming from here down, but I don't care. I do care that the state of the world we're in, where this faithful Craftsman screwdriver, that I have removed every seal in every transmission I've ever stripped by hitting on the end of it. I mean, the thing's beat. And I've ground a hook in it for snap ring removal. This is the same one I was telling you about. I push up through the apply hole to set the rear band. This screwdriver and I go back a long ways, and now I can't go to Sears to get a replacement should that ever need to be replaced. At this point, I'm pretty sure I got my several dollars worth out of it, but still, I liked Sears. I used to like the catalogs, holiday time, about this time of year they'd show up so you could dream of what you could ask for Christmas. Modern day kids, I guess they have their own version, their own memories of it. Probably when I was reading those catalogs, it was some old dude saying it wasn't the way it was when I was a kid. So I guess when you pull back on the old stick and climb up a little bit, you realize the more things change, you know the rest of that one. So that's that. It's Monday. I've successfully talked for X amount of time. And while I made a video, I didn't get any further ahead on my transmissions, but that's okay because I like doing both. So now I suppose I'll go eat breakfast and get busy doing something. So it's Columbus Day. Well, whatever they call it these days. Yep. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you in a few days.